Hi all, after a long and arduous 2 months now, I have finally completed the Corsair Auraxium, and as a result have become the first player on Connery with the Corsair Auraxium. I will be linking the FISU page in the video description when the API updates. It's about 10 hours from time of recording. That if you go down to the Corsair tab and you look at the people who have completed it, I am the only player on Connery. Humble brag, but I could not do this. I'm just going to intro it right now. I couldn't do this without the people that helped me, whether it's anyone in Connery who's been a sore target for the Bulldogs and the HEGs, to my loyal group of players that have always been willing to hop on when I ping them with the Corsair role, those being players Thumbs, Brodo, Corey Doolin, Dark Force, Cap Iron, and Boomshackle, as well as Riva. You two are, or not you two, but all of you have been so helpful. Thank you all so very much for helping me do this. I really could not have done it without you, and that's going to be a main point when I talk about this thing. You cannot use the Corsair alone. You need people to help you out. So this is going to be basically an all-in-one video. I know I'm wasting a lot of time here, but I'm just excited about Auraxium this thing. Sue me. You cannot do the Corsair alone. So this guide is going to assume you have at least 4 people. So under ideal conditions, you have 6, but really you need at least 3 to work it, and you want 4. So the Corsair... Okay, this is a weird opening, but I'm not going to go back and edit this. So this is going to serve as a guide, what I think is good on the Corsair, what I think is bad on the Corsair, and how to complete the directive yourself, should you wish to subject yourself to the same level of hell that I did. So, the Corsair, first off the bat, needs players. You need at least 3 people to be optimally effective in this thing, and you really want up to 6. So, you need 3 because you need your driver and you need your 2 gunners. And this will usually let you beat most other boats and people who are just sailing around in the water minding their own business. But what you really want is a second boat. And the reason for this is you need proximity repair. Proximity repair is mandatory, and with every additional Corsair you add, that boosts your survivability greatly. And you need max rank prox rep too. We'll go over that when we talk about, what I recommend in each slot. So, you need realistically 2 Corsairs to be powerful, because then you'll each be proximity repairing each other, and as a result, it's a lot harder to kill you. Obviously, the more Corsairs you add, the better, but then you really start to compete with each other for kills. You'll be bumping off of each other a lot. I think 2 to 3 Corsairs is a sweet spot, meaning that for the Corsair to truly be an effective vehicle, you need 6 to 9 players. So if you don't have friends, this boat is not for you. And if you're trying to do it solo, forget it. It's rough. Next, let's talk about general use. So, the Corsair can only be pulled from seaposts, the warp gates, and certain select bases that I don't care to name. The main important ones here are Astera Hydroelectric and Excavian Cleanup, because they're in the middle of the map, and that's where they're most convenient to pull, obviously. So, in terms of what fights the Corsair works in, as I've mentioned, I'm doing this all without a script after getting the Auraxium. I'm sorry in advance if I sound kind of out of plan here, but I am so ready to be done with this ship. So, the fights this thing excels in are infantry fights that take place on the shore. This is why new Excavian is actually quite good, because a lot of players are going to be on the shorelines, and you can farm them. However, at the same time, you get deleted by tanks, you get deleted by construction AV turrets, because they're very good right now, you get deleted by aircraft, you get deleted by infantry lock-ons, you get defeated by max hummingbirds on the defector, and in general, you get killed a lot. And this is where having multiple proximity repairs Corsairs come in, because it lets you survive a whole lot of damage. And in general, I actually can't recommend a whole lot on the guide of how to use it itself. Obviously, I'm just doing this all in one take, without editing. But the Corsair requires a lot of feel. It's not something that is easy to describe. You need to understand and get a feel for how the Corsair handles and what you can and can't get away with. And a lot of this is fight dependent, and that's why you'll need to know going into a fight, what you can and can't get away with. The important things to remember are always use hardcover to block rounds, namely, say, the Excavian Tower. The tower that's in the water is excellent hardcover to protect yourself from, say, lightnings on the shoreline here, or tanks up here. You can use the tower to block rounds. And if you have multiple Corsairs, you can create safe zones where, you can just be repairing out of harm's way. Another word of advice. C4 from light assaults is actually not as dangerous as you might think. First of all, you can survive 2 C4 if you're at full health, which is nice. But more importantly, if you see yourself getting C4'd, immediately jump on the throttle. The server will not be able to catch up the C4 to your Corsair's position by the time the other player detonates it, and you will avoid most, if not all, of the damage. It's a handy trick to know. It is something that you will just have to get a feel for, but it is a handy trick nonetheless. As for other use, just get a feel for what you can and can't go after. In general, as long as you have 2 Corsairs proc strapping each other and at least 2 gunners in at least one of them, as long as you have 2 gunners and 2 proc strap Corsairs, you can generally outtrade most vehicles on the water. Now, on the shoreline, it's a bit more risky. This is a lot of where it just comes into feel, can we take this engagement? Can we not take this engagement? When do you need to run? And timely fire suppression usage is key, because if you time your fire sup just right, you can gain an extra 600, 700 effective HP in an engagement, which will make the difference more than not between life and death. This video is probably going to be long. This is all out of script, no plan, no script, no nothing. I'm just talking about this thing. The Corsair is weird. So yeah, for short, for general use, you need friends, you need a good feel of the Corsair that will ultimately just best come with the amount of time you can put into it, and you need at least a basic understanding of how the water works in this game. And you need the right guns. So, the Corsair has ultimately 4 guns available. Your Empire-specific Basilisk, the Dingo, and the Bulldog. Now, all of these kind of have their uses, and some of them are completely worthless in most situations. So, we're going to start with the Basilisk. The Basilisk is fine. Ultimately, as a whole, if you have guns, you're probably just going to want to pair them up. So, for example, run 2 Basilisks, run 2 Bulldogs, etc. Just because it'll maximize your efficiency against the targets you're going after. And if you have really skilled gunners, they can usually make up for the deficits, like the Bulldog is obviously hard to use against air, but a really good gunner can make it work. So the Basilisk is okay. It's a good general use weapon. It has good long-range damage output, which is really nice, because in the Corsair, if you're running away from stuff, you'll need to be far away from people. So it is very, very useful to have. I don't think it's the best option. I think there are other options that are better, but it is a very safe pick. Obviously, if your gunner likes the Basilisk, slot a Basilisk on. It also comes with the advantage of the fact that it's cheap. It's really cheap to cert as a whole, and you get a ton of spare ammo with it, which is really handy. Moving on to the Empire-specific Basilisks, that being the HGG on NSO, the Pariah on Vanu, the Palisade on TR, and the Trawler on NNC. So, obviously, I did this on NSO, which means I have the most use with the HGG. The HGG, compared to the Basilisk, is about a side grade. It's better against infantry, it's generally worse against vehicles. So, for example, the HGG has the sweet spot between about 30 and 80 meters, where it outdamages the Basilisk against enemy vehicles. Other than that, the Basilisk is always better. Now, if you're a skilled Corsair pilot, you can kind of try and keep engaged between this range, in which case the HGG is great. The other use of the HGG is that it has a 50 meter 250 damage range, meaning that out to 50 meters, you 4-shot infantry, which is really, really huge, especially because you're not always going to be right next to infantry. You're in a boat. So the HGGs are good. I would overall consider them to be slightly better than the Basilisk, but they're not great. The Pariah on Vanu, obviously you're just going to keep looking at the HGG, but we're going to talk about all of them. The Pariah is so-so. I think it's probably worse than the Basilisk overall. Ultimately, the slight damage buff it has in close range isn't really useful with the Corsair because you're just simply too far away most of the time, and it loses out on damage at long range compared to the Basilisk. It having no drop is nice, don't get me wrong, it is a nice feature to have, but you will learn to compensate for the drop anyway on the Basilisk, and on the whole, I think the Pariah is fairly weak. I don't think I would recommend it over the Basilisk. The Palisade on TR is a bit hit or miss. It has lots of really good sustained damage output, but loses in bursts to the Basilisk. It's handy. It's probably about the same in terms of total effectiveness. It's largely up to you and your gunners if they like running it. And the Trawler, just like on every other vehicle, the Trawler is great. It hits really, really hard. It has good burst damage output. It's great. It's really strong. Ultimately, I haven't used it very much myself, but it's strong, just like how it is on every other weapon. Moving on to the Dingos. They're worthless. Now, I know I said that every gun on this thing has at least some use, and that's true. The Dingo is okay against light aircraft. If you have 2 of them, they're okay against aircraft. And you need to pair them up, or else they're useless. So, we're going to use a basic number here. How many Dingo rockets do you think it takes to kill an ESF? I will give you a moment to guess. You need 15. The Dingo has 6 per magazine. This means that you need 3 full magazines of Dingos to kill an ESF. And with 2 of them, that means that you're still going to have to eat a reload no matter what, assuming the guy just doesn't, fly off or have composite armor or has fire suppression. So you don't actually kill a lot of aircraft with this thing. Also, worth noting is that it does not have reload speed, magazine capacity, or ammo capacity cert lines, meaning that this thing bleeds ammo like a bitch. meaning that unless you have a proximity ammo Corsair near you, which is generally not the right type of Corsair to pull, you're going to be constantly running out of ammo. I can't recommend them. They're funny, don't get me wrong. It's funny to run 2 of them and just go fuck with aircraft, but they're not actually useful. Moving on to Bulldogs. Now, Bulldogs are really, really strong, but demand good gunners. They are by far the best option against infantry, because they have massive splash range, and 500 indirect out to a meter is really, really handy. In addition, because they have so much raw damage, you fuck up vehicles. If a vehicle isn't paying attention and is close, you can shred vehicles. You will out-trade Lightnings if you're hitting their rear armor. So, in the right situations, Bulldogs are very, very powerful. But it's important to realize that they are Bulldogs. They have shit range. Unless you have a gunner that really, really knows what they're doing, you're going to be missing constantly. And honestly, on the move, forget it. If you're trying to hit another Corsair with your Corsair and you have 2 Bulldogs, you probably just lose that engagement. I would personally save the Bulldogs for situations where you know you can farm a lot of infantry, such as the Excavian Central area, but they're still a good option provided you have good gunners. You will need to communicate with them, though. Make sure, make sure that your gunners are good with the Bulldogs, or make sure that they at least like the Bulldogs before you slot into them. Otherwise, just stick with the Basilisk, or, your Palisade, your Trawler, or your HGG. As I've mentioned, probably just pair them up. Using mismatched guns in the Corsair is a bit of hit or miss because you're just kind of kneecapping yourself against select targets. So let's say you're running a Basilisk and a Bulldog. Well, you're not that great against infantry because, well, you have a Bulldog, and you're still pretty shitty against vehicles at long range because you have a Bulldog. But you have not that good sustain because you only have 1 Basilisk. You really should be pairing guns up and trying to make the most out of them. But it's your Corsair, figure out what your gunners like, but I would definitely say pair up guns. It's just more effective that way, it's easier to use, it'll make things simpler, and more importantly, it will make it easy to figure out what targets you can and can't pick. Moving on to the actual loadout itself. Fire suppression is the only option, and this is actually a very simple choice. So fire suppression works like it does in every other vehicle. You get 15% HP over time, and it will immediately extinguish fire, meaning that if you learn how to time your fire suppression effectively, you can save 700, 600 HP. Because fire starts at 800 on the Corsair. And because it immediately extinguishes fire, this means that if you're below 800, it will immediately put you to 800. So if you can save this fire suppression to like 100 HP, 200 HP, you've just given yourself an extra 600, 700 effective hit points. It's huge. It's really, really handy. So it's the go-to option in every situation. Chaff is not that good. Yes, you do get 25-second cooldown at max rank, and you get 8 seconds of block from lock-ons, but lock-ons don't actually kill you that much. They'll whittle you down, but it's not that often that you'll get killed by lock-ons, and if you do get killed by a lock-on, you are probably going to die anyway. It just doesn't last long enough, and the cooldown is too long for it to really help you. Like, if a lockdown's going to kill you, it would probably kill you anyway, or you wouldn't be able to get away from whatever's shooting at you anyway. It's just not that strong of a pick. And fire suppressions, again, having that instant back to 800 HP is super, super handy, and will usually save you from lock-ons more than Chaff will. Submerge is completely worthless, and I'm sure I'm going to ruffle a feather or two, but having, been driving the Corsair for 40 hours on this account, it's very easy to realize why Submerge is not that good. So Submerge, when you activate it, it puts you underwater. It's pretty slow, but it puts you underwater for up to 5 seconds. Okay, this doesn't sound too bad. It has a 25-second cooldown at max rank, or maybe it's 20, I don't know, I never bothered starting into it, and you'll see why pretty shortly. The thing is, while you are underwater, you cannot fire your guns, meaning that you are completely defenseless for a full 5 seconds. Other people can still shoot at you. And if you're in a Corsair v Corsair duel, the other guy just parks near you and lets his gunners mow you down while you can't shoot back and just waits for you to re-emerge. You're completely defenseless. And people who are shooting in the water, guess what? They still shoot you. You just lose. There's no situation where Submerge is actually any good. IR Chaff is better at blocking locks. Fire suppression keeps you alive better. Submerge is completely worthless. There's no reason to ever run it. Do not even think it exists. It's not even worth getting the first rank on. Moving into the defensive slot. Your only 2 choices here are auto repair and prox repair. And if you are auto repair, I hate you. So auto repair is great because you don't have to beat yourself as often. It's good if you're running solo Corsair. But as I've already established, you don't want to be running solo Corsair, even if you have 2 gunners, because you just don't survive that long. Prox Repair is huge. It gives you a lot of healing. It's actually ridiculous just how much healing it gives you, and it's strong. If you have 2 to 3 Corsairs with these, it's really hard to kill you, and you can always just say, run, and get the hell out of there. Now, the one downside of Prox Repair is that it's only 30-meter range, meaning that client-side will more than often fuck you over if you're trying to run away. For example, let's say 2 Corsairs are running away in the exact same direction with one in front of the other. The one behind will generally not be getting repaired because of client-side fuckery, whereas the one in front will be getting repaired. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just something to keep in mind with Prox Repair, that if you're running away from something, you need to coordinate to make sure that you are, in fact, both getting healed. I would really like to see Prox Repair brought up to 40 meters. An extra 10 meters would probably fix this client-side issue, and I don't see it breaking auto-repair. But it's just something to keep in mind. Ammo Dispenser is, in theory, really nice, but in reality is actually not, and that's because Ammo Printer exists. Ammo Dispenser, if people are running Ammo Printer, you're just not useful, and you're not helping survivability. So, unless you're running like a whole group of double Dingos, there's no reason to run Ammo Dispenser. Just run Prox Repair. It just helps you out and your team a lot more. As for the chassis, now this is a lot up to you. I found Recon Chassis to be the most useful, but they all have their uses. Agility Chassis will just make you a bit more maneuverable, and compared to running Speed Chassis, you only lose about 15 kilometers an hour of top speed. It's nice to have. It is honestly decent. Agility is fine if you like having a more maneuverable Corsair. I ran Recon. It does give you 75 meters of stealth, quote-unquote. So it's like getting vehicle stealth. It's still shitty stealth. It is only 75 meters, but it's still handy. It helps. And, more importantly, you get 120 meters of scout radar range, which if you're running double Bulldogs at Excavian is great as long as your gunners are looking at their damn minimap. Also, you just print Recon XP with this thing. It's nice. I found it to be the most useful, but, you know, you can make arguments for running the other chassis. Speed, I would argue, is the least valuable of the set because you really only gain 10 kilometers an hour over, say, Recon Chassis, which doesn't actually change that much. Things that can chase you down will still chase you down, and things that you can chase down, you can still chase down, even without. It's nice. It's a very convenient pick to have, especially if you're just driving from point to point repeatedly, but on the whole, I think it is the least valuable of the three. For cosmetics, Cert Explosion Horn is by far the best way to go. So a quick talk on the cosmetics as well, because I have the Auraxium trim for this. I am the authority of all Connery players. I'm the only player that has this thing. Let me stroke myself a little bit and enjoy the ego posting that I get out of having the only Auraxium on Connery, and the 8th in the game, might I add. Honestly, the Corsair cosmetics are pretty weak. I ran the smooth sailing plating for most of it. It was a free giveaway for Prime. Other than that, I don't know, pick whatever cosmetics you like. I like the Admiral cockpit the most as well. The reason I'm now running my Corsair without any is so that the Auraxium has more time to shine. Camouflages are largely up to you. Blue camo is kind of funny because you're in water and it actually does kind of work like camouflage, but it's PlanetSide. Do you really think I care what you're running on your boat? Of note, it is handy to have two different loadouts. You know, if you have a loadout set up for certain guns, it can be handy to have, like, say, a Bulldog loadout and an HCG loadout where you can just quickly swap between the two. But it's not that urgent. It's not that important. Moving on to the Corsair Directive itself. It is pretty bad. I dropped gun kills. And we're going to talk about, I think, as a whole, you either drop logistics or gun kills. And I think, personally, you drop gun kills. So, driver assists are really easy. It is just be in the driver's seat when your passengers are getting kills with the guns. This one just comes with time. Farm infantry is the biggest advice I can give for this one. Obviously, killing infantry is a lot more efficient than killing vehicles. Construction kills do not count for this. Keep in mind. Squad spawns is a time-consuming thing. This one is usually best earned when you're doing transport assists at the same time, which I will explain in a bit. But it's just spawned directly into the Corsair. Just minimize the amount of time you have people running to get in your ship. The Corsair does have squad spawns built into it, but it has its own problems. And I should talk about this earlier, but I'm going to talk about it now. So you see all this quote-unquote dead water on the map, is what I'm calling it. You know, places where it's not considered a hex. You know, this area is dead water. There's no hex here. If you're in this area, you cannot spawn into the Corsair. Because it's not technically a hex. The game doesn't let you spawn in there. So if you want people to spawn in, you need to be within a hex radius, which is very, very annoying. In addition, sometimes it just straight up fucking breaks and doesn't let people spawn in. There are many workarounds for this, such as just spawning in and redeploying immediately, or Sometimes leaving the boat and getting back in will fix it. It's really inconsistent, and it's just fuck. Sometimes you'll get squad spawns, sometimes you won't. You'll just have to figure it out. It's really buggy. It just doesn't work properly. Logistics is resupplying teammates. So, you do this one with Corsair. If you have 2 Corsairs working together and taking active fire, you'll get logistics pretty easily. You do need to be the driver, but it does print a lot of XP. It also prints repairing ribbons, and it prints squad leadership ribbons if you're in the same squad, and you can abuse this for platoon leadership ribbons as well. Transport assists. So this is when somebody uses the cannonball launcher and then gets a kill. Up until they die, in which case, obviously, if they get revived, it will stop counting their kills. This one's really easy. Just park on the shore, wait for some... Just tell a squad to, just use the Corsair. Find a decent fight. Leave yourself on the shore, let people jump out into the base. It's pretty easy. Now, Cannonball is also really easy. Cannonball is probably the easiest thing in this whole thing, because you launch from the Cannonball, and you get kills afterwards. It's, of course, largely dependent on your own skill as a player. But the easiest way to do this one is to, just park your Corsair next to a Sunderer, launch out the cannon. If you die, respawn at that Sunderer, jump back in your Corsair. You can also use squad beacons. If you really want, if somebody else is working on the directive, obviously you could do transport assist alongside, where, you're jumping out of their Corsair, so they're getting transport assist and you're getting cannonballs. You can do this one with a friend, basically. But if you need to do it solo, just plant it near a Sunderer and just keep jumping back in. Gun kills. I didn't do this one. It's pretty easy. Obviously, just get kills while you're in the gun of the Corsair. Farming infantry is, of course, more optimal, but it's not that hard. You will need 1200 for these Auraxium. As a quick reminder, I didn't even say it. So you'll need 1200 driver assists, you will need 1200 squad spawns, you will need 250 logistics ribbons, you will need 800 transport assists, and you will need 800 cannonballs. Logistics ribbons carry across tier to tier. For example, logistics ribbons that you earn in, say, bronze will carry all the way over to Auraxium because they're ribbons. And, interestingly, cannonball does as well. So any extra cannonball kills you get on earlier tiers will carry over, which makes it actually really, really easy. Funnily enough, you will also technically Auraxium the cannonball when you get your 800 kill. Now, I don't know why this is. I presume it's the way they track this, but I got 200 certs after getting my 800th cannonball kill. Like, getting an Auraxium. I presume cannonball tracks like a medal, but I don't know. Obviously, I don't know the game's code, but I assume cannonball tracks like a medal. Just keep in mind that you can carry this one across tiers, so if you have particularly good fights, but you're only on silver tier, you could still continue to grind out your cannonballs. It's just something to be aware of. Now, fun fact, the squad spawn has a typo in its description. It spells Corsair wrong. I noticed this about 30 minutes before Auraxiuming the Corsair, and I want you all to know. This just shows you how little people actually do this directive or even care about it. Even the developers. So, I will give you one more look at the Corsair Auraxium. It's pretty alright. It has not as much coverage as I would have liked. I would have liked some more coverage on the top, but the top hatches have Auraxium on it, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, most of it is underwater, which you just generally won't see, but it's still pretty cool for what it is. This video has been a huge mouthful. I have basically just been ranting about how to use this thing for the past 23 minutes. Apologies if, you don't have a whole lot of... This isn't a professionally made video, this isn't scripted, this isn't edited or anything. This is me rambling about this stupid fucking thing for 20 minutes. As a whole, I do not think the Corsair is a good vehicle. In fact, I could very well argue it is the worst vehicle in the game. You simply need too many players to make this thing actually effective. And if you have bad fights, you just won't be doing anything. For example, if you have fights that are taking place at, high areas of the map, say Sentry, where they're all, in the base or on the ridgeline, you're useless. You won't be able to shoot at anything or really do any one. Construction bases completely fucking obliterate you because spear turrets, 5-shot you, and they're really easy to use if they're manned. Well, they have to be manned nowadays, but you get the point. And in general, you get shit on by vehicles. You get shit on by a lot of things. Now, you can do well with the Corsair, don't get me wrong. Some of my gunners had really good KDRs while they were, in the Corsair. But there is a lot of time where if the fights are bad, you're just not doing anything. You'll be killing this random Sunderer that's trying to get to a base, because there's just nothing else to do. So, it's theoretically a very strong vehicle, if you have a very competent crew, if you have multiple Corsairs, and if you're using the cannonball launcher on a tactical level to get neat positions at bases. But for just general use, it's useless. I can't recommend it. I cannot recommend it at all. I don't think it's a good vehicle. I don't think it's very fun. It absolutely has its moments where, you know, if you're in Excavian and you're in the bay and you're proxy-praying each other and you're racking up kills and you're dodging tank shells, it has its moments. Unfortunately, they do not come very often, and even when they do come, you will often be put to death very quickly by tank shells, and you will just die. You don't die a lot to burst damage, but you will die a hell of a lot to chip damage. Which is, again, why Chaff is not that good. So, if you have any questions on the Corsair, what I think of it, this has not been a professionally made video at all. I just want to stop getting this thing out of my fucking head, because I am so sick of Corsairing. If you have any questions in the comments, or if you want any advice on how to use it or whatever, please let me know. I am more than happy to ask. And, yeah. It sure is the Corsair. As for how I would buff it, I don't know, I'm just kind of ranting with this thing. The Corsair is weird where I don't really think it needs buffs. I think it's just fundamentally designed poorly. It needs too many people to be effective. I think building auto repair into it would be interesting. Hell, even just giving the engineer, the engineer's aircraft synergy, where it will give you level 1 auto repair in an aircraft, so long as you're playing the engineer. Letting that apply to the Corsair as well would actually be a huge buff for solo survivability, which would be really handy. Other than that, it's just not designed very well. Submerge could be single-handedly saved by letting you fire your guns underwater. That could create some balance concerns, but it would make it at least more useful, more interesting. I still don't think it would be very good, but it would at least not make you completely defenseless while using it, which would be kind of handy. The chassis, I think, are all fine. They're all a little boring, but they all do the trick. They're fine. I would really like to see more guns added to this thing. Cobalts would be a fucking godsend. You know, halberds would be pretty cool. If they wanted to make it so you couldn't, say, double stack halberds or cobalts, you know, you could just lock it to only being on, say, the top or the front gun. You know, you only make the halberd available to the front slot, because the front slot also has shitty fire angles, because the boat itself blocks your camera if you're trying to shoot behind you. Which would be a good way to balance having maybe stronger guns on sets of the Corsair. Maybe putting Empire-specific tokens on it, like, putting a Saren on the top of it, or, like, a Gatekeeper, or an Enforcer would be pretty cool. Just having more options. There's really only one way to build this damn thing, and it's fire suppression, prox repair, chassis of your choice, plus either 2 Basilisks, 2 of your Empire-specific Basilisks, or Bulldogs. There's just not a lot of ways to build this thing. It's not that fun to use. Definitely its biggest deficit is the fact that it's only available on Osher, which nobody likes playing on, and you won't like playing on. Over the past month, I have put 40 hours in the Corsair, give or take. And this has been 40 hours of Osher, usually during off hours, where there's just not much to fucking do. So, it's a fine vehicle. There's our content alert. I just wish it was better. I just wish it was more fun. I just wish it wasn't on Osher. But, you know, the devs have expressed that the Cannonball launcher is very strong. It could very well break base design. Not that, you know, you can just put a fucking galaxy above the base, but whatever. I get why they don't put it on other maps, but come on. I would really like to see it. Just have a place to shine that isn't Osher. Fuck J908 impact site on Indar. Fill the whole thing up with water, add walls around it, put Corsair terminals on each side of it, and turn it into a Thunderdome. I don't know, make it fun to use. Fuck, make an alert for Osher that makes them free to pull for an hour. I don't care, at least then you get your big stupid Corsair fleet battles. I don't know. Look, I wanted to like this thing, and it is fun. Don't get me wrong, and I'm just totally ranting at this point. It is fun, it has its uses. But it's not worth your time. It's a novelty pull. It is absolutely a novelty pull that you will pull maybe once a session on Osher if, like, the squad leader says, hey, let's get Corsairs up. It's a novelty pull. It's not worth actually sitting into. It's not worth going after the directive for. I only did it because I thought it would be funny to be the only one on Connery with the boat Auraxium. It is kind of funny, but it's painful, man. It's so painful. Thank you all. As I said, if you have any questions, advice, whatever you want to know about this stupid fucking thing, leave it in the comments. Thank you for watching. I hope you do not use your Corsair. I hope I've proven that this thing is just complete ass. And have a better day. Have a better month than I did using this damn thing. Thank you all.